with the amazing Sarah Murray, who I had the pleasure of meeting at this year's Mission Discovery in London. So, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Well, Anya, first, I want to thank you for inviting me to do this with you. It's something that I really love to do, and it was great meeting you at Mission Degree. You were awesome. So, a little bit about myself. So, there's a lot because I've been working for quite some time now, but I think what I want to start out with is that it may appear that I was successful, and yes, I was. I don't want that imposter syndrome, but it wasn't my plan. And so, folks, you might have a plan, but it doesn't always go to plan. Now, about myself, I will say that my 30 years at NASA were awesome. I did 30 years at NASA. My background is in electrical engineering, and my first job at NASA was working as a flight controller in mission control. In mission control. So imagine coming right out of school, and then they tell you you're going to push this button and control the space shuttle. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is important. And so I need to do a really good job at this. So that was one of my most interesting jobs. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And from there, I moved on to managing that group. I was a supervisor, and it's called the INCO group, which is the communications group for the shuttle. So, and just real short, my career at NASA entailed mission control flight controller. I did move up to be a manager. And then after that, I moved from Space Shuttle to Space Station. And in Space Station, I initially started out in the power group. And this is where those folks are responsible for the power on the space station, which means they're responsible for the solar arrays that collect the rays from the sun. So it was very different for me because I moved from communications to power. And so I had to learn different skills, different knowledge. Then from there, I moved to training the astronauts. And that was quite interesting because not only am I working with these awesome individuals, but training the astronauts means training as a team. As you remember, when we did Mission Discovery, we broke you guys up into teams and we wanted you guys to function as a team. Well, this is what is necessary for our astronauts. So as a team, the space station is an international space station, which means that all the astronauts must train together. This means our astronauts from all over the world, because astronauts from the different agencies, the Japanese agency, the Canadian Space Agency, the European Space Agency, and also from Russia. What I learned here was that I thoroughly enjoyed working with different cultures. It was just great. So I chaired a board which was responsible for managing all of the astronaut training, all of the astronauts around the world. And on that board were representatives from each one of those uh, space agencies. And so that was very interesting for me because now I'm working with different cultures. It wasn't just going in a group of people. It was understanding their cultures, the nuances that go with those cultures, and making sure that we were productive. After I did that, I did spend some time in EVA robotics and crew systems. Now, this division was responsible for the extravehicular activities that our astronauts do. And so what's really cool about this job is that when we train the astronauts for the EVAs, and the EVAs are spacewalks, by the way, I know you know that, but for everyone that's listening, they are our spacewalks. And the way that we train for spacewalks is in what we call the neutral buoyancy laboratory. Now, the neutral buoyancy laboratory, it's one of the largest indoor pools in the world. It's got 6.2 million gallons of water, and it has a mock-up of the space station immersed in the water. And so what the astronauts do is they train, they put their spacesuits on, they go down in the water, and they train on whatever task that they are going to be responsible for when they go into space. Now, they do this numerous times because this is the best environment to simulate microgravity. So that was great too, because it gave me a different leadership skill also in managing their training in the water and managing our safety divers. And so that was every job that I've had, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Every job that I've had. I did spend some time in Washington, D.C. at our nation's capital at NASA headquarters, working with his name. So I worked with Charlie Bolden. Charlie Bolden was a good friend of mine. We met in the 80s when he was an astronaut, and then President Obama appointed him to be the NASA administrator. So I did some time in Washington, D.C., but I must say that it wasn't my favorite job because it wasn't as technical, though I was able to learn different ways and how we manage all the centers across the country. I think I really preferred working the technical jobs. So that's a little bit about myself. That's just my NASA thing. I do have other experiences. I am prior military. I served in the Army, in the United States Army for a few years. And now I am retired and doing consulting. As you know, I do mission discovery, so I love working with teenagers and helping them find their way. And I also do leadership training for various companies also. And this is done with the company ISSET that also brought us to London.
It sounds amazing to throw yourself into so many different jobs and aspects of NASA. You said it wasn't always your plan, but did you always want to work in NASA? Or if not, what else did you want to do when you were younger?
Yes, that was not my plan. I will tell you, my plan was to be a pediatrician. That was my plan. I wanted to be a pediatrician. And so this is where I'm going to talk about some of it's probably not right to call them missteps because they still got me to where I wanted to be. But when I graduated from high school, I went to the university and I was majoring in biology or chemistry. It's funny, I don't remember, but I wanted to be a physician. And so this is hard to talk about because it is a misstep. So I found a guy, and it was one night before our finals that we had an argument. And I felt the next morning that I had not studied for my finals. And I was so used to making good grades, I didn't know what to do. So instead of going to my final exams, I went to the Army recruiting office and signed up to join the Army. And so and so, so when I went into the Army, though, I went into the medical field. So I worked in the emergency room for a number of years, and a lot of that time was spent in Germany. As a matter of fact, my firstborn was born in Germany. And I learned a lot. But guess what? Guess what happened? When I finished with my Army career, I went back to school and I turned in my resume. And when NASA saw the resume, yes, I had an electrical engineering degree, but what stuck out was that I worked in the emergency room. They needed someone who could think fast on their feet and think about it. I'm working in the emergency room, so you had to make quick decisions to save people's lives, and that translated to working in mission control because mission control, I would say, is not for the typical classical engineer that needs 2 weeks to 2 years to design something. Because the space shuttle, it takes it doesn't take very long for that space shuttle to get into space. So you have a few minutes to decide what to do if there's a problem. And so yes, I wanted to be a physician, but I didn't realize that mission control would be my type of job. I still enjoyed it. It was still quick and fast and just an amazing thing to do and working with all the different types of people. So um so that was not my plan, but have you ever heard if you shoot for the moon and miss, you end up with the stars? And I think that's exactly what happened with me, right? Shooting for the moon, I may have missed, but I still ended up with the stars.
I mean, that's a very good way to think about it. And transferable is always an amazing thing to also put
Yeah,
forward.
but people, I don't think people realize that yes, you have a plan. However, make sure that you're learning and doing the best you can at whatever you're doing, and it will translate in the future.
Talking about learning, did you ever have any role models growing up for either?
Oh, goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So at the top of the list were my parents. My parents showed me how to work hard and not give up, period. Just work hard. And that's because I saw the struggles that they endured and they were still there for the entire family. So they were most definitely my role models. My dad worked 3 jobs, and and he worked the night shift because he needed the night differential pay, and then he had his own taxi cab, and then he also cleaned office buildings and there were 5 of us, and all 5 of us, sometimes on the weekends, we were cleaning office buildings also. So I watched how hard he worked to put food on our table and keep a roof over our heads. And then my mother, the same. She was a very strong person, and she always taught us to do the best we can do at whatever you're doing. You may not, say for instance, you may not end up in the job that you want initially, but still be the best at it. And the way she put it, if you're a janitor, no one should mop those floors better than you. No one. And you never know who's watching. So always be the best you can do. And I think that has helped me excel because I've always wanted to be the best.
That's a
So
very
they were role models. But so those were role models just forever. There's a group that I also met during Mission Discovery. We did Mission Discovery in India, and there is a restaurant in Agra run by some young ladies who were victims of acid attacks. And they run this restaurant and help other young ladies that have had, are victims of acid attacks. And I will tell you, those were role models for me because these ladies had been through traumatic events, and they are still moving, they're still working, and they're still trying to help other people. And so I point to them also as role models because sometimes, people get up in the morning and they're like, oh, my hair isn't right this morning, or oh, I have a pimple on my face. Those things are so minute compared to what other people go through. And so looking at what these ladies went through has really encouraged me to just never give up no matter what. And the name of the group, they have a Facebook page, is called She Rose. If you ever go there, you'll see all the awesome things that they are doing. So those are good role models. Now, at NASA, so NASA is really good at providing mentors and such. And so I wanted to be a really good leader. I really wanted to be a great leader. And so I looked at, and this might sound odd, but Oprah had a show. It's not her talk show, but she had a behind the scenes show, how she works with everyone who works for her. And I saw one show where she came into her operations room at the end of the talk show, and she looked at her folks and she says, that was a good job. She says, I'll have to admit I was wrong. I didn't think you could pull it off, and you did it. And so to me, she was very open and honest with her folks. They trusted her. She was also, she empowered them to do things that she was even uncomfortable with doing, but she empowered them to do that. And so so I wouldn't say that she's a role model, but I took some things from her that she did. And then I'm going to mention one other leader, and his name is Milton Slade. I met Milton uh, at Goddard's Flight Center in Maryland. And he had picked up my resume and said, I want you in my group. So he hired me. And a couple of months in, he told me, you don't belong in my group, because he knew that I had more experience and my background, my educational background, and he helped me move to another group. Now, here he is losing a person, but as a leader, he was still looking out for the people in his group. And that's what I took from that, is that you look out for the folks that are in your group. So those are kind of my role models. And like I said, they're not all role models, but there are certain things that you can take from other people.
Well, that's amazing because it shows that there's not just one role model either, and that there's always different bits you can learn from people. So you've talked a little bit about how you started out in your military career, but how did you go about applying for NASA, and what advice do you have for someone looking to start a similar career?
Yeah. So this is just another interesting story. So I graduated from high school. I graduated with my electrical engineering degree, and at the time my husband was still in the military, and we had orders to go to Germany. So we had already been to Germany, but we had orders to go back to Germany. So we're just sitting. So I hadn't gotten a job yet, and we're sitting to um, be sent to Germany. But while I was in school, I had applied to work as an intern at NASA, but I had applied to work at an intern at numerous places. At the time, I was married, I had my toddler, and NASA was paying a certain amount of money. And there was another company called El Paso Natural Gas that was paying more. I took the job at El Paso Natural Gas at the time because I needed the money. So it turns out that NASA still had my resume after I graduated, and they called me. So I got a phone call, and they asked to come out to Houston for an interview. And I told my husband, and we thought, well, shoot, we have orders to go to Germany. What are we going to do? And he said, well, you've never been to Houston before. You do need to practice. You can practice on your interviewing skills, but we're still going to go to Germany. So I went, I interviewed, and then I just fell in love, because they took us straight to mission control. And I didn't realize what it all entailed. So as soon as I got back to the hotel that evening, I said, dear, it's a space shuttle program. It's mission control. What are we going to do? And so we made the decision. He went to Germany without me, and son and I started at Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. So it's different than other folks who grow up, they're 6 years old and they want to work for NASA and they want to work for NASA. And that wasn't me. It just turned out that I was interested in it while I was in school. And so I applied to be an intern. And so it just, to me, I felt like, oh my gosh, what luck was it that they still had my resume and called me. And so that's really how I got there. Now, after I got there, I knew that, I had to do what my mother told me, be the best at what you do. And that's how I was able to move up. Now, as far as advice for meeting your goals, I recommend, first of all, do the best, be the best at what you can do, whatever it is, even if it's a job you don't like doing, do it and be the best at it, and someone will see it and you will benefit from it. But also try to stay focused. And I would say for instance, when I'm in college and didn't go to take my finals, I didn't stay focused, right? You really need to stay focused. And if you can, you know, if that's your goal to finish school and be in a certain career, do that, because it was difficult doing that, being married and having children. And so that's my other piece of advice, is take care of that important stuff first before you add on to it, because you really want to be good at both. So that's some advice I would give. And then also, you might think you want to know where you want to be, and that's fine. But I recommend that you talk to someone who is in that field. Talk to them. And if possible, let them see if they'll let you shadow them for a day. Can I shadow you, see what you're doing for the day, and then you can really see more details on what the job entails and whether you like it or not.
Those are some amazing bits of information. And I like how you applied for the oil and NASA. And I mean, yeah, shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you aim for the stars. Um,
That's right. I did.
Now, were there any challenges you faced along the way? I know you've mentioned a few, but what advice would you have for someone who's experiencing the same sort of thing?
So, trying to say this the right way. The first thing is just keep going. Keep going. I don't care what happens. And if you have to cry about it, you cry about it, get it out of your system, but you've got to keep going. And don't let those things discourage you. Now, a couple of challenges that I had. One was, and maybe it's two, one being a minority, a woman and a black. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I first went back to school, and I won't name the school, but I went and because this is not where I graduated from, but I went to the counselor, I went to the engineering department and explained my background. And the counselor said, "Oh, you're in the wrong building." And I said, "Oh." So she told me where I needed to go. I went to that building, sat down and talked to that counselor, signed up for my classes. And about halfway through the semester, my instructor says, "You're really good at math. You should be in engineering." So the first counselor sent me away from the engineering building to what they called, I think it was like electronic engineering technology or something like that, which is kind of a lower degree. So I know that when I talked to her, I said I wanted to go into electrical engineering. But because I wasn't that familiar with how things worked, when she sent me to a different building, I trusted her in that she was sending me to another engineering building, which she was not. And so I wasted a semester in this one field, but then after talking to the professor, I was able to get into the engineering program. And so when I look back on that, I thought that was not nice of her to do that, but I learned from it. You have to be careful, even when you're talking to knowledgeable people, you never know when they're not, you know, doing what's right for you. The other huge challenge is what I mentioned before, is being married and having children while trying to go to school. That was really tough. And so, and I can tell you, when I was in El Paso, Texas, we had one car. And so going back and forth to school meant a bicycle. with a child seat on the back of the bicycle. And so I would put my son on the back of the bicycle, and a lot of times he would have to go to my classes with me at night. So I would have to go to school sometimes in the evening. Of course, we didn't have laptops at the time. So we had our computer rooms, and the best time to get the computer was at midnight. So I would pack my baby up and we'd go to the computer room. He had a nice little sleeping bag. I put him on the floor next to me and we'd work. So that was tough. And I would also say, in general, it's tough being a mother with and having a job that I had at NASA because kids no longer want anything to do with NASA. There were times when I was in the office, at midnight, and I had three little ones. So I had a total of four, and my little ones spent a lot of time in their book bags on the floor in my office at NASA. So, but that was the only way I could get the work done. So, I kind of regret not being the mother that I think I should have been, maybe spending more time. I did spend time with them, but that time was spent in my office with them sleeping on the floor in the sleeping bags. So I regret some of that. But I did my best. I did my best. So that was a huge, huge challenge for me. As far as the challenge at work, though they may seem like challenges to most people, I recognize them, but I didn't recognize them as challenges when, say, for instance, when I first started working as the chair of the international board, the Russians weren't always as open and accommodating, but then I built up a relationship with them and it worked out just fine. And as a matter of fact, I'm still friends with everyone that was on that board with me 10 years ago. And so yes, it was a challenge, but my recommendation is just not give up and find different ways to attack the challenge. Or if there's nothing you can do about it, you just need to press on. You really just need to press on and not let it discourage you.
And I guess keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, that sounds amazing. To
Yeah,
come through all
yeah.
those challenges. Now, moving on to a more positive note. In your career, you've achieved so much. And what would you say is one or a few achievements that you're most proud of?
No. So, I want to say probably, well, first of all, you have to go through a lot of training to get certified to work in mission control. You are controlling the space shuttle. You are sending commands to the space shuttle, and you can make it go in different directions, turn systems off and on. And so it's serious business. So I was really proud of myself for being able to learn that. And then moving up to be the supervisor. I had not been there too long, and I was competing against folks that had been there 10, 13 years and were clearly had more knowledge under their belts than I did. But I was selected over them because of my leadership skills. And and they call it being a person, we call it soft skills. So you can't just be a leader and tell people what to do. You really do need to know how to work with people. And I did have good soft skills when I worked with folks. And so that's important, not only when you're leading a group of people, but also when you have to interact with other entities outside of your group. So that I think that was a huge accomplishment for me. And then also I was selected to lead the Columbia recovery effort. Now, for those who don't know, we lost the Columbia Space Shuttle in 2003. And it was a huge effort across the country with a lot of different entities that FBI, FEMA, NTSB, the Army, the military, everyone was involved in trying to collect the pieces so that we could, make sure that we understood what happened. We did that for a few months and we needed to consolidate our efforts. And so when we moved the office to Houston, Texas, then I was selected to lead that effort. And so that was huge because I was working with a number of government entities I had never worked with before. And because of that and some other things that I had done at NASA, I was awarded the Snoopy Award. And the Snoopy Award, the Silver Snoopy Award, is an award, my understanding is it's given to about 1% of the people that work at NASA. And for their contributions and their performance. And so I was really proud to get that Snoopy Award. Really proud of that. But I think if I look at everything as a whole, my goal was always to be the best leader. When I became a supervisor and working with folks, my goal was to be the best leader that I could be. I wanted my folks to trust me. I wanted to, and there are times where, you can't tell your folks everything, but if you build up a good relationship with them and they'll understand, well, we trust her. We know why she's not telling us this. And so there were different times where I couldn't say what I needed to say, but because my folks knew me, then they understood. And so I did a survey one year, and I've done multiple surveys with folks that worked for me. And what always comes up, I score highest on is trust. They trust me. And that's because they know that I cared for them. I do what I can for them. But there are times where I have to make decisions that they don't like. But because we had a relationship, they understood it. So I am proud of that aspect of it and that I can go talk to folks and that worked for me. I mean, how many people say we had a great boss? And that's what I like to hear.
Moving on to present day, what does a typical day look like for you?
Present day. Oh, wow. So that's kind of a tough one for me now too, because um I retired from NASA after about 30 years because I needed to care for my dad. And also, I had lost my son. He was about 40 in a motorcycle accident. And so I have two grandchildren, and I want to spend as much time with them as I can and caring for my dad. But then my dad passed. So he passed a couple months ago. And so now I'm in my days are so different because I'm not with him every day. And I think I'm still adjusting to that, but trying to spend as much time with my grandkids. And then I also do talks like I'm doing now. I like to talk and encourage folks. I still do mission discovery is great because it's not a typical day, but I do it a number of times during the year where I get to travel to Australia or India or Singapore or London. And we do it every year in London where we work with about 100 to 200 students. And so I think that's kind of my typical day. I do try to catch up on a little Netflix, but I don't get a whole lot.
Well, first of all, sorry for your loss of your dad. And I'm sure he was very, very proud of you and what you've accomplished. And thank you so much for taking the time out
Yes, he
today to now do the interview. Someone as talented as you must have so much going on. So, are there any plans for the near future? Maybe linking to mission discovery or more leadership talks?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So we do have a mission discovery program coming up in Dubai in March. So I'll be there. And the mission discovery programs, of course, there's not just me, right? There's Chris Barber, who is the founder of ISSET. He will be there with one of the astronauts. I probably will be Steve Swanson. I do believe Steve Swanson will be there. I don't remember which one of the astronauts was with us when we were in London together, but was it?
Yeah, Dr. Dave Williams.
Oh, that's right. It was Dave. It was Dave. So Mission Discovery in March in Dubai, and we will probably be back in London again in July. And then throughout the year, ISET is working with as we work with different companies and providing leadership training. We have a leadership simulation that we provide to their supervisors also. So I'm still busy, but those are the things that are on the horizon right now.
Well, those are still amazing things to be doing. In terms of mission discovery, for those people who don't know about it or any of the other things that ISET do, how do you get involved with those sort of aspects of those things?
How do I get involved with the mission discovery?
And yeah, and how do you sign up and stuff?
Oh, how do you sign up? So they have a website. And honestly, I if you type in mission discovery, ISET, so it stands for International Space School Educational Trust. But if you just put ISSET, then that will get you where you need to go to sign up for mission discovery. And like I said, the next one is in Dubai, and there's one in London coming up. So yes, please sign up. I'll be there. And you will thoroughly enjoy it. It's 5 days of fun, right? Right?
Yeah, I'm sure people watching will be very excited to have a look at that. And finally,
Yes, and another plug about Mission Discovery. These students come together most of the time that no one knows anyone. And by the time the week is over, we're all in love with each other. We're hate leaving each other. But not only that, they have come together and they've learned to do different things. They've learned to work together. And one of those teams has come up with an idea to conduct an experiment on the space station, and that experiment will be put on a rocket and launched to the space station so that the astronauts can conduct it. So the outcome is super, but there's so much that goes on during the week. I think everyone learns something from it.
I'm sure people watching will be very interested to have a look. And finally, if we've already had loads of amazing advice, but what's one piece of advice or one thought that you'd like to leave anyone watching with?
Oh, let's see. I would say, especially in your career, well, I say just be the best. I have a list. Okay, it's not one. You be the best. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but make sure that you learn from them. Don't be afraid we're going to make mistakes. If you can get a mentor, get a mentor. Mentors, I think, are important. And you don't have to have one mentor because different mentors provide different things. And then exposure. Make sure that you're not just focused on one thing. Get exposure in different areas. It helps you make better decisions. And when I say exposure, it's different fields, exposure to different types of people, different cultures. All of that is so important. There's there's a lot I could tell you about advice, but those are the main ones, I think. And just don't give up. Don't give up. Reach out to people, reach out for help if you need help.
And that's a very important message to finish on. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Okay, Anya, thank you much, and you take care.
Okay, bye.